There are people in this world who will simply disappear from your life and never explain why. Not because they are weak, not because they stopped caring, but because they understood something about themselves that you never took the time to understand about them. They knew their own value, and the moment you forced them to question whether you knew it too, the decision had already been made in silence. Most people spend their lives terrified of being abandoned, so they make noise, they argue, they plead, they issue ultimatums, they perform pain loudly in the hallways of other people's attention. But strong people, genuinely strong people, do something profoundly different. They go quiet. And that silence is not emptiness. That silence is the sound of a door being closed from the inside, calmly, without ceremony, and locked from a place you will never find the key to. This is not about anger. This is not about punishment. This is about something far older and far darker. It is about the psychology of those who have been burned enough times that they no longer fear the cold. You didn't lose them because they gave up. You lost them because they finally chose themselves, and they did it so cleanly that you barely felt the cut until you reached for them and found nothing there. The first thing you must understand about people of genuine psychological strength is that they process pain in a way that most people are completely unequipped to recognize. When ordinary people are hurt, they react. They text at 2 in the morning. They bring up old grievances at dinner tables. They make their devastation loud, visible, almost theatrical, because somewhere inside them they believe that if the other person could just see how much damage they've caused, things would change. But strong people, they do something profoundly different. They sit with it. They hold the pain like a stone in their palm, studying it, turning it over in the dark of their own mind, not rushing to react, not leaking their devastation into the air around them. This is not emotional suppression. This is emotional sovereignty. There is a critical difference, and most people never learn it. Suppression is when you bury something because you cannot face it. Sovereignty is when you face something so fully, so honestly, so ruthlessly within yourself that you no longer need anyone else to validate what you've already decided is true. Strong people reach their conclusions alone, in silence, and by the time they move, the verdict has been final for weeks. You were still thinking the relationship was going through a rough patch. They had already eulogized it, grieved it, and started building a life that didn't include you. That is the cruelty of it. Not intentional cruelty, but the cold, clean cruelty of absolute clarity. There is a psychological phenomenon that researchers in relational dynamics refer to as the emotional withdrawal curve, though it is rarely discussed in the language of strength. Most conversations about it frame it as avoidance, as emotional unavailability, as a wound from childhood that causes people to shut down when things get hard. And yes, sometimes that is exactly what it is. But there is another version, a version that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with wisdom earned at great personal cost. When a person has been ignored once, they adjust. When they have been ignored twice, they adapt. But when a pattern crystallizes, when they see with perfect and terrible clarity that the dynamic between themselves and another person will never change, regardless of how much they give, how honestly they speak, how patiently they wait, something shifts in them. Not loudly, not dramatically. Something simply settles, like sediment falling slowly to the bottom of still water. And from that settled place, they begin the quiet exit. Not out of rage, not out of spite, out of a calm, devastating self-respect that most people will spend their entire lives never knowing the texture of. The thing about strong people that makes their departures so psychologically destabilizing to those left behind is this: they never telegraph it. There is no screaming match that ends with a door slam you can point to and say, that was the moment. There is no tearful confession, no dramatic declaration of enough is enough. They simply begin to require less. They stop reaching out first. They stop over-explaining. They stop softening their truths to protect your comfort. And because the withdrawal is so gradual, so imperceptible in its early stages, the person being left rarely sees it coming. You think you are watching them pull back because they're tired or stressed or going through something personal. You give them space, which is exactly what they wanted. Not because they needed to be drawn back in, but because every inch of space you gave them was an inch of distance they were quietly converting into permanent separation. By the time you realize what was happening, they are already gone. Not physically, not yet, but psychologically, emotionally. That version of them that was invested in you, that version checked out months ago. What you were speaking to now is a courtesy, a formality, the ghost of someone who already made their peace. There is a concept in Dark Stoic philosophy that speaks directly to this moment, and it is one that most people find deeply uncomfortable because it forces them to confront their own responsibility in the architecture of their own abandonment. Marcus Aurelius wrote of the discipline of perception, the idea that what we choose to see and what we choose to ignore shapes the reality we end up living inside. Strong people, those who practice this discipline not as an academic exercise, but as a survival mechanism forged in actual relational pain, have developed an almost surgical honesty about what they are looking at. They do not tell themselves comfortable stories. They do not explain away patterns as coincidences. They do not negotiate with evidence. When they see that a person consistently prioritizes their own comfort over the health of the connection, they believe what they see. Not immediately, not without grief, but eventually, completely. And that completeness is what makes their exit permanent in a way that most departures are not. Most people leave and leave a door cracked. Most people leave and wait to be chased. Most people leave because they want the other person to finally understand the weight of what they're about to lose. But strong people close the door behind them without looking back, not because they feel nothing, but because they have already felt everything. And they have decided that their own future is worth more than waiting at the edge of someone else's indifference for one more season. What most people also fail to understand is the cost that strong people pay for this kind of exit. There is a cultural mythology that frames quiet, dignified departure as the absence of pain, as if the people who leave without making a scene must not have really cared, as if the ones who scream and beg are the ones who loved deepest. That mythology is a lie. The quiet exit is often the most expensive emotional transaction a person will ever make. It costs them the fantasy. It costs them the version of the relationship they spent years trying to build. It costs them the hope that things would eventually become what they were promised to become. And it costs them the other person, not as they actually were, but as they could have been, might have been, in another version of the story where both people chose each other with equal intention. That grief is real. That grief runs profound. But strong people carry it with them as they walk forward instead of throwing it at the feet of the person who caused it and begging for them to pick it up. That is the definition of dignity under pressure, and it is rarer than most people will ever know. Here is the final and most brutal truth about why strong people let you lose them. They are not punishing you. They are not making a statement. They are not waiting for you to come to your senses and arrive at their door with the right words after too long a silence. They are protecting the most sacred thing they have left, which is their own inner life, their own psychological peace, their own future, the version of themselves that has not yet been given to anyone. Every person carries within them a finite reserve of genuine investment, of real emotional presence, of the kind of attention that actually changes another person, that actually sees them, holds them, challenges them into becoming something greater than they were before. Strong people understand that this resource is not infinite. They have watched themselves pour it into the wrong places. They have felt the specific exhaustion of giving everything to someone who treated their presence as background noise. And they decided, quietly, finally, irrevocably, that the remaining reserve deserved to be protected. Not hoarded, not weaponized, protected. For whatever comes next. For whoever has actually earned the right to witness them fully. So when you find yourself standing in the space where someone used to be, confused about when the warmth turned to distance, asking yourself what you missed and when you missed it, understand that what you are feeling is not just the loss of a person. You are feeling the consequence of an accumulation, of every moment you looked at someone extraordinary and chose to act ordinary in response.
They did not leave in anger. They left in clarity. And there is nothing lonelier in the human experience than realizing that the most important person you will ever lose chose themselves so quietly that you didn't even hear it happen.